let's generate our motivation. And reflecting that sentient beings mean well, but their minds are overwhelmed by ignorance. So they're constantly looking for comfort, for pleasure, to be free of pain. And they view the world through the tiny periscope of me, I, my, and mine. So even though they want happiness, this whole setup, this whole mental approach to the world causes them pain, and they don't realize it. But instead think that the external world needs to be changed so that they can be happy. So when the world is filled with people with this kind of view, to expect them, to have high expectations of them, is really not appropriate. So yes, they have the Buddha nature, and they can change, but we should not expect them to immediately recognize that and begin to transform their minds, but instead approach them with a sense of tolerance and fortitude, and at the same time nudging them along the path. So without becoming discouraged or despondent or cynical, we continue to enhance our love and compassion and see all sentient beings as lovable, remembering their kindness, having fortitude in the face of their very narrow views. And in this way, look for these same defects in ourselves, our narrow views, the way that our approach to the world limits us, and try to overcome that so that we can be of greater service to sentient beings. And lead them on the path. And so for that reason, we're here to share the teachings today. Okay. So, just a little housekeeping thing. In the Vinaya, it says that the monks and nuns are only to teach people who, or not to teach people who are seated higher than them. Yeah, and so the chairs are only for people who are sick or have physical pain. If you're working with a computer and you need a space to work, these tables are great. If you make them high, they're a very good level to type at. Okay? So I thank the people who are sitting on the floor for enabling me to keep my precepts. So there's some questions here. First, Venerable Tarfa's quite long one. Oh, but before I do that, where did you get that information on the Kadampa? It's very different than what I've heard before. From where?
Different resources from the internet, and I did not take a lot of time to
Okay.
all into where I got those information.
Okay. Because what I might do is just take. Unfortunately, my notes about it are buried in the the thing. But there's some in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand that I can read to people. Yeah. Okay. So your question is, I'm wondering if the explanation of the meaning of ignorance as being only passive for the Theravada tradition is misinformation or misunderstanding or lack of knowledge on the Tibetan side. First of all, the book is not written up from the Tibetans' view of the Theravada. It's written from the Theravada's view of themselves and what they themselves say. Okay? So, they usually, I've heard it said that ignorance is just, it's like this dark cloud. We can't see things clearly how they exist. Yeah. Now, you gave some quotations here, but I don't think any of them contradict this. Okay? So the Buddha teaches that there is one defilement which gives rise to all the others. Yeah, so it's ignorance that gives rise to others. Okay? Now here it says, ignorance is not the mere absence of knowledge, a lack of knowing particular pieces of information. That's very correct. Ignorance isn't, not knowing all the varieties of plants and the species of animals and that kind of thing. Okay? And ignorance can coexist with a vast accumulation of itemized knowledge, and in its own way can be tremendously shrewd and resourceful. Very sure. There's people who know tons in the world, have tons of worldly knowledge, but the ignorance in their mind completely obscures them from understanding the nature of reality. Okay? And then as the basic root of dukkha, ignorance is a fundamental darkness shrouding the mind. That's it. Sometimes this ignorance operates in a passive way, merely obscuring correct understanding. At other times it takes on an active role. It becomes the great deceiver, conjuring up a mass of distorted perceptions and conceptions, which the mind grasps as attributes of the world. So that's showing how, starting with ignorance, you get all the other afflictions coming out of ignorance. It's not that all the other afflictions are ignorance. So from ignorance, for example, you get the mind that thinks impermanent things are permanent. Yeah, that things that are in the nature of dukkha are pleasurable, that things are foul by nature are pure. Yeah, and so all that comes out of ignorance, but they're different things. Okay, and so it is too, from the Pali viewpoint, the view of the personal identity. It's something that comes out of ignorance, but isn't ignorance. Whereas in the Prasangika, it is ignorance. Okay. Okay. So then, why is the wisdom Dharmakaya categorized as the ultimate Buddha jewel? It seems like the qualities of the wisdom Dharmakaya work as descriptors of what the enjoyment and emanation bodies do. Okay, the Dharmakaya is the wisdom, the omniscient wisdom of the Buddha. Yeah, you have to start with that, and from that omniscient wisdom of the Buddha appear the form bodies. Okay, so because you have that omniscient wisdom, therefore the form bodies can do what they do. Okay, so the wisdom Dharmakaya is not just a descriptor of what the form bodies do. Yeah, it's the whole thing behind it. They often talk about accomplishing the purpose of self and accomplishing the purpose of others. So the Dharmakaya is accomplishing our own purpose because our purpose is to free our minds from all defilements, to obtain the omniscient mind, and then along with that comes the nature Dharmakaya, okay? And then to fulfill the purpose of others are the two form bodies because they're what act to benefit others, okay? So the Dharmakaya is the fulfillment of the self-purpose, and it's what enables the fulfillment of the purpose of others. Okay? When you attain Buddhahood, you obtain all four kayas simultaneously. Okay? So it's not that first you get the Dharmakaya, and then the Dharmakaya thinks, oh gee, I better emanate some bodies here. No, it's by this time everything is so habituated in a different way that these things automatically, spontaneously appear to benefit sentient beings. So the Dharmakaya makes everything effortless. Yeah, so very different than us, where we have to plan and we have to get the energy to do it and then get around to doing it. And, it's not like that for the Buddha. Okay? And then another question. It says an emanation body derives from an enjoyment body. An enjoyment body emerges from the wisdom Dharmakaya. A wisdom Dharmakaya arises within the Buddha's nature Dharmakaya. As the nature Dharmakaya is where the other bodies arise from, why isn't it listed as the first of the two types in the category of the ultimate Buddha jewel? Because, again, the emphasis is on the Buddha's omniscient mind, which is what enables the communication with sentient beings, it enables the production of the form bodies. The nature Dharmakaya is, the fulfillment of that individual's purpose, the true cessation, but it's the nature of the mind, yeah. So it isn't emphasized in the same way as the wisdom aspect of the Buddha, which, is what enables all the benefit for sentient beings to arise. Okay? Anyway, it's only an order of things. It doesn't mean that one's necessarily more important than the other. Yeah. But usually when you talk about something, I would say, here's the gong, and the nature of the gong is empty of inherent existence. I wouldn't say, oh, there's the nature of the gong. There's the emptiness of inherent existence of the gong. And by the way, this is the gong. Yeah, you usually wouldn't say it like that, would you? Okay, anything else from yesterday? Oh. Yeah.
You mentioned something about the wheel turning Buddha, and I think I maybe didn't hear it quite correct. Or is that just an emanation body of the Buddha, or is it?
Yeah, when they talk about wheel-turning Buddhas are special Buddhas because they're the ones that teach the Dharma at a time when the Dharma doesn't exist in a certain world system. Okay? And so they're special that way. Shakyamuni Buddha was one of those. Yeah. And even though he appeared to be born as an ordinary person, actually not so ordinary. I don't know many babies that stand up and walk 7 steps and say, this is my last life, if you're going to take it literally. Okay. But Shakyamuni Buddha was an emanation body. In other words, he was enlightened before, you know, and then that's a manifestation of the Dharmakaya in the form of an emanation body in order to turn the Dharma wheel in this universe at that time, because the Dharma did not exist here then. Okay?
So all Buddhists can emanate a wheel?
Yeah. Yeah, they all can. You just have to find a universe where the sentient beings have enough good karma to have a wheel-turning Buddha there. Okay. But then once, you know, so now there's been Shakyamuni Buddha, who's the wheel-turning Buddha in our universe. There's still other Buddhas who manifest in our world system. Yeah, but they aren't identified as wheel-turning Buddhas. Yeah, they don't wear name tags. I always tell people, you know, they don't wear name. Hi, I'm a Buddha. Hi, I'm an Arya Bodhisattva. You know, they don't advertise like that. Okay. Although I'm sure there's some company who would really like to get their account and advertise for them and make them into a superhero. Okay, so we'll continue on in the chapter about refuge. So Buddha's awakening, parinirvana, and omniscience. Okay, and so these are three topics where there's some difference between the Pali and Sanskrit traditions. So the three jewels are called jewels because they were rare and precious. Like the mythical wish-fulfilling jewel that grants all wishes and needs, they are continuously willing and capable of providing us refuge, protecting us from samsara's dukkha, and showing us the way to attain lasting, pure, and blissful fulfillment. The Buddha jewel is the source of sentient beings' virtuous intentions, encouraging us to seek upper rebirth, liberation, and full awakening. Yeah. So they say that the enlightening influence of the Buddha is what enables sentient beings even to have a virtuous intention at all. Yeah. Why is that? I think it's based on the idea that without somebody at some point in our beginningless history in samsara, talking to us about what to practice and what to abandon, what is virtue and what isn't virtue, then sentient beings, you know, due to ignorance, would not necessarily have those kind of virtuous intentions. And so it becomes clear, like if you look at your own life and your way of now, you know, since you've met the Dharma, being able to create so much more virtue and transform your mind, that's due to hearing the Buddha's teachings, which is due to the Buddha's awakening influence or awakening activity. Okay? So while followers of both the Pali and Sanskrit traditions take refuge in the Buddha, they may have different perspectives on his awakening, parinirvana, and omniscience. The Pali tradition says he practiced as a bodhisattva for many previous lifetimes and attained full awakening under the Bodhi tree in this life as Siddhartha Gautama. As a Buddha, he had no mental pain, but experienced physical pain due to having a body produced under the power of craving and karma. You know, so because he was born as an ordinary being, he was still in samsara. His body was a true suffering. It was produced by craving and karma, you know, by the 9th and 10th links of dependent arising. Yeah, and that ripened at the time of death. And of course the karma was the second link that happened way before that. But, you know, so his body is still a true suffering. and as such is something to be abandoned after he passes into Parinirvana. Okay, so some say that when he passed away and attained Mahaparinirvana, all samsaric rebirth ceased, and his consciousness entered Nibbana, an everlasting, stable, unconditioned, peaceful reality that cannot be conceived in terms of time and space. Okay? So some of the people in the Pali tradition say, at the time he attained, well, first of all, what they say is an arhat, when they become a non-returner, when they become an arhat, they still have the polluted body. So they attain first nibbana with remainder, the remainder being the polluted body. When they pass into parinirvana, then they attain nibbana without remainder, because they give up this polluted aggregate, okay, which is a true suffering. And in the case of the Buddha and the other arhats, all samsaric rebirth has ceased because its cause has ceased. Okay? And the Buddha's consciousness entered nibbana, an everlasting, stable, unconditioned, peaceful reality. So nibbana is a reality, it's a state that cannot be conceived in terms of time and space. In other words, you can't say nirvana exists 3 clouds up, 2 clouds over at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so get there on time if you want to get in. It's not like that. Yeah, it's something that it's a state of mind that comes completely from mental transformation. Okay? So here, parinirvana is a reality that is the opposite of the polluted impermanent aggregates. Okay, so on one hand you have the aggregates, but they're ceased because the cause has ceased. So nirvana is the opposite of that. Okay, in the Pali tradition they don't say a lot actually about what nibbana is. It's more expressed as what it isn't. Okay, and it's not gone into in great depth. Sorry, my jewelry is scratching me. Okay, then others say that parinirvana is the cessation of the defilements and the cessation of the continuation of the aggregates. In other words, they say that when an arhat dies, not just the physical aggregate is stopped, the body is stopped and abandoned, but the mental aggregates, because there's no ignorance and karma causing another rebirth, then they also cease. So all the aggregates are abandoned. Okay? So means the continuation of the aggregates all cease. So here the complete cessation of the aggregates is considered peaceful. Okay? So they just say that, there's samsara stopped, there's no continuation of the aggregates, so basta finito, that's it. Okay? This is the Pali tradition. Okay. Yeah, Sanskrit tradition's quite different. Okay. So in general, the Sanskrit tradition believes that Gautama Buddha practiced as a bodhisattva for many previous lives and attained full awakening before his life as Siddhartha Gautama. So he was already enlightened long time ago. Okay. However, by appearing as an unawakened being who attained full awakening in that lifetime, he illustrated the importance of exerting effort and working diligently to train the mind. So this appearing as an ordinary being, within his family, and, all the pressure from his family to follow his father's footsteps, and, all the pressure. He's got to get married, he's got to have a baby, he's got to, have all the, the whole shtick. Okay? So all of that was a show to show, that the example of somebody who's just like us, and then, how he renounced that, what he went through, how he dealt with all the difficulties of his renunciation, how he dealt with the hardship of practicing the Dharma, how he attained full awakening and then benefited so many beings. That also, the whole thing was a teaching. Exactly. It was a teaching. So he manifested in that way to show us an example, to teach us. Okay? Because if the Buddha had just, descended on earth from the sky, with in sparkling gold, landing, on the top of the Capitol building in D.C., that people would think, to become a Buddha, you already have to have been a Buddha. It's impossible. There's just this sparkling guy up there that we have to worship, and people would not have really taken the teaching seriously. Okay? So they always say that when Buddhas manifest amongst us, and when Bodhisattvas manifest amongst us, they do so as just ordinary beings. Yeah? That, if you look closely, maybe aren't so ordinary. I mean, His Holiness looks like an ordinary being. In another way, he's not so ordinary. Okay, but you can see his life is quite an example, too, of how to practice, isn't it? Whenever we start belly aching and feeling sorry for ourselves, imagine at age 15 having to take over the leadership of a country. Yeah, you think you have problems? Imagine at age 15 you're supposed to lead a group of people in a situation where their country is getting occupied by a foreign power. Yeah, could any 15-year-old handle that? Yeah? And then, of course, being a refugee and everything that entails, and watching what happened to Tibet after the occupation. So his life is quite a teaching, Okay? But he doesn't announce and say, here I am. He says, I'm just a simple Buddhist monk. Yeah. So then we have to try really hard to be simple Buddhist monastics, because we kind of want to be big, fancy, well-known Buddhist monastics. Okay, His Holiness is showing a different kind of example. Okay, so through the Buddha's example, he gave others confidence that they could practice and attain the same awakening that he did. Yeah. While the Sanskrit tradition agrees that the polluted aggregates do not continue after the causes for samsaric rebirth has been extinguished, okay, it says there is no agent or antidote that can totally cease the continuum of the clear and aware nature of the mind, which remains uninterrupted and endless. Okay? So, one moment of clarity and awareness produces the next moment of clarity and awareness. And there's nothing that can stop that from happening. In the Pali tradition, they're looking at it as if you have clarity and awareness, it's going to be polluted. It's automatically polluted. For the ones who say that the mental continuum discontinues, okay? They're going to say, if you have the 5 aggregates, they're going to be polluted, including your mental continuum. Everything's polluted. So if you've gotten rid of the pollution, then all of those aggregates must have ceased, because there's no cause for polluted aggregates, and that's the only kind of aggregates there are. In the Sanskrit tradition, they say, no, there are pure aggregates. Okay? And the pure aggregates can continue on because there's nothing that can make them cease. Now here also, I mean, it's easy to show that from a Sutrayana perspective, in terms of the mental aggregates, that they continue on from life to life in a purified form when you become not from life to life, but they continue life to life when you're in samsara, and your mental aggregates continue in a purified form when you've attained nirvana, okay, or mahaparinirvana, okay. So, because there's nothing that can cease them. Then the question comes, what about the body, the physical aggregate? You know, for sure, that can't continue on. Even when you become a Buddha, if you become a Buddha in this life, you know, if you have that same physical body, that's definitely not going to continue on. So what is the physical aggregate, the form aggregate, you know, that continues on? Here's where you get into Tantra, where you say, you know, that the ultimately subtle thing is the extremely subtle mind and the extremely subtle wind that is its mount, and those two always go together. So your gross body is going to be abandoned, but because there's still the extremely subtle wind that can manifest as another kind of body when you're a Buddha. And in fact, it's that extremely subtle wind that produces the enjoyment body. Okay? So the Sanskrit traditions say the aggregates don't cease upon attaining parinirvana. Yeah.
We can't see that the aggregates become the Dharmakaya.
The pure aggregates are the Dharmakaya and so on. But you can't say the polluted aggregates become the pure aggregates. You can say the clear and knowing nature become the wisdom Dharmakaya. You can say the extremely subtle mind and wind, which was previously obscured by defilements, can continue on and become the body and mind of a Buddha. Okay. So that in Tantra, it was what makes the connection between what we are and what the Buddha is, how we can become the Buddha. Okay, when some texts say that the psychophysical aggregates are abandoned at the time of parinirvana, yeah. So remember, I was saying that from the Pali view and also from the viewpoint of, I think, all the lower schools, yeah, that at the time of, although I'm not sure, they may say this about the Arhats. I don't know that they would all say this about the Buddha, okay? Okay, but remember we said that in the case of Arhats, first they attain nirvana with remainder, then nirvana without remainder. Okay, the Prasangika have a different view of that, and their understanding is rooted in Nagarjuna, in a passage in Precious Garland that we haven't gotten to yet. Okay? So Nagarjuna, so when some texts say that the psychophysical aggregates are abandoned at the time of parinirvana, Nagarjuna explains this refers to their not appearing to an arhat's meditative equipoise on emptiness. So Nagarjuna says, yeah, the discontinuation of the polluted aggregates is not that the aggregates themselves stop and there's no more person, but that in an arhat's meditative equipoise on emptiness, the aggregates no longer appear. Because, why? Because only emptiness appears to that meditative equipoise. Yeah, the conventional aggregates are not within the appearance of that. Okay, so at the time of parinirvana, the aggregates in general continue. However, they are now purified aggregates. Okay, so let me give you a preview to that verse in Nagarjuna. We actually talked a bit about this already in the earlier part of chapter 1, in the verses, I think like around 42, 43, something around there. It talks about it. But in the 4th chapter, verse 386 and 387, here Nagarjuna says, the non-arising taught in the universal vehicle, the Mahayana, and the extinction taught for other Buddhists are both emptiness. Therefore, one should accept that extinction and non-arising are ultimately the same. Okay, so this talks about the knowledge of extinction and the knowledge of non-arising are the same. Okay, so the fundamental vehicle's explanation of the knowledge of extinction, which is as the fundamental vehicle, as the Pali tradition thinks, it means the discontinuation of the aggregates. Nagarjuna is saying that's not the correct understanding, actually, or that's not, maybe he would say, the only understanding of what that means. Okay? Because if that extinction means that truly existent aggregates are not seen, okay, it's the extinction of truly existent aggregates, because they aren't seen in that meditative equipoise. That is the same thing as in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras when they talk about non-arising, that the aggregates do not arise inherently. There are no inherently existent aggregates. So he's saying that what they call extinction actually means the emptiness of inherent existence of the aggregates. Okay, they're saying, extinction means, that the aggregates just go out of existence. Nagarjuna says, no, they're perceived as empty of inherent existence, and in that way, they no longer exist. That your grasping at truly existent aggregates is cancelled out, and the appearance of truly existent aggregates is cancelled out. So from the Sanskrit view, first you attain nirvana without remainder. Here the remainder is the appearance of true existence. So in meditative equipoise, an arhat first realizes emptiness, sees the emptiness of the aggregates. Then when they arise from that meditative equipoise, truly existent things appear to them again. So they say, the Prasangikas say, first there's an arhat attains nirvana without remainder of the appearance of true existence. And when they come out of meditative equipoise, then they have the nirvana with remainder of the appearance of true existence. So according to Nagarjuna, what the remainder is quite different than what the Pali tradition says it is. And he uses that to prove that then actually people in the Pali tradition who meditate according to the Pali Sutras do realize the emptiness of inherent existence. They don't just realize the selflessness of the person being not a self-sufficient, substantially existent, that they actually realize the emptiness of inherent existence. Okay, so this is remember when we study tenets, all the other schools say, oh no, the arhats just realize the emptiness, there's no self-sufficient, substantially existent person. And the Prasangikas say, no, they realize the emptiness of inherent existence of both persons and phenomena. Okay, well, this is how Nagarjuna shows that happens. Yeah, and he says that there's teachings on the emptiness of inherent existence in the Pali Sutras. Yeah, and that somebody with astute faculties will see that. And so what he gives as some examples is quite interesting when you read. There's some things that you read in the Pali Sutras and you're going, this is, I look at it and say, wow, this is Nagarjuna. Yeah. A Pali commentator looks at it and describes it in a different way. But I look at it and like, whoa, this is saying the same thing as Nagarjuna says. Yeah. So you can see how, different verses can be drawn out in different ways. But one of the verses that they point to is, when they say the body is like a ball of foam, feelings are like a bubble, that one where they go through the 5 aggregates. Nagarjuna says that's actually explaining the emptiness of inherent existence of phenomena. Yeah, saying that all the phenomena are insubstantial like that. Okay, so we got diverted there, but it's interesting, It'll prepare you for when we get to that stanza. Okay. Okay, so at the time of Parinirvana, the aggregates in general continue, however they are now purified aggregates. Because the Buddha appeared from the enjoyment body and ultimately from the Dharmakaya, both of which are endless, when he passed away, the continuity of his awakened mind remained, while Gautama Buddha no longer exists, because the aggregates, the appearance of the aggregates that were the basis of designation for Gautama Buddha, that appearance was absorbed back into the Dharmakaya. Okay. Still, the continuity of his awakened mind remained. Okay. The continuum of that omniscient mind continues to fulfill the purpose for which he practiced the Dharma so diligently for so long, to lead all sentient beings to full awakening. To do that, he effortlessly manifests emanation bodies to benefit sentient beings throughout the universe. Okay? So in the Pali tradition, for those who say that the continuity of the aggregates cease, there's no idea of a Buddha that emanates in the universe after Shakyamuni Buddha to guide us. Okay, there's not that idea. For the ones who say that the Buddha's consciousness got nibbanaized, as Bhikkhu Bodhi puts it, that it absorbed into that reality, again, they would say that's it, they're free from cyclic existence, stay in that reality of nirvana forever. Yeah, the Sanskrit tradition says they stay in that reality for a while, and then the Buddha wakes them up and says, there's sentient beings who are still immersed in dukkha, and you need to come help them. And then they have to start at the beginning of the Bodhisattva path. So even though they've realized emptiness, that part of the path they've accomplished, they have to go back and accumulate the merit for 3,000 great eons, the merit motivated by bodhicitta. Okay, so that they can finally become Buddhists. So that's why our teachers always encourage us, if we can, to enter the Bodhisattva vehicle directly, because in the long term, you become, although you may it may take longer to free yourself from cyclic existence, you get to Buddhahood quicker than if you first become an arhat and then become a Buddha. Okay? So from the Buddha's side, he is always ready and capable to help. But because of our lack of merit and spiritual experience, we cannot see him. Yeah, this is the function of ignorance, it blinds us. Just as sunlight radiates everywhere equally, the Buddha's emanations and awakening activities spread everywhere. However, just as an upside-down vessel cannot receive the sunlight, our karmic obscurations and lack of merit curtail the Buddha's ability to help us. No sunlight can get in there even though there's light all around. And the problem isn't with the Buddha, the problem is with us because our minds are upside down. Okay? When the vessel is turned right side up, so nothing's changed from the side of the sun, everything's changed from the side of the vessel, okay, then the sun naturally enters. So when we purify our minds and accumulate merit, our mind's receptivity to the Buddha's awakening activities increases, and we will be able to perceive things such as the 4 Buddha bodies that until then we may have found baffling. Yeah? So it should say we will be able to understand things such as the 4 Buddha bodies, not necessarily perceive. I should be making a list of these mistakes that we find. The one where there was not an S where there should be. Somebody want to keep track of these? And in this one it should say, understand things as the 4 Buddha bodies. Okay, I have heard, now here, His Holiness talks of it. It's quite interesting. I have heard of some Theravada monks. All this information, by the way, came from my visit to Thailand. He asked me to go to Thailand to learn about Theravada Buddhism. So I've heard of some Theravada monks. This is not the prominent school in Thailand. This is the forest tradition. So it's some Theravada monks, not everybody, who are skilled meditators and who say that the bright, clear, and aware cheetah is the Sanskrit or Pali term for mind, while being superficially tangled up in afflictions, is not subject to complete destruction like samsaric phenomena. Whoa, that's different, isn't it? Okay. Afflictions are not inherent in the cheetah, although it needs to be cleansed of the defilements that obscure it. Okay, that's so far I agree with the Sanskrit tradition. Deathless, okay, so I think here if you interpret deathless as eternal, not ending, and independent of time and space, the cheetah continues to exist after wisdom has ceased all defilements. It's almost sounding like the extremely subtle mind, the fundamental innate mind of clear light. Almost like that. Okay. And actually, in the this is mostly in the commentarial tradition of the Pali tradition. I don't know if the Vibhanga is mentioned in the sutras. I don't think so. I think it's all commentary in the commentarial tradition. But there's this discussion of what they call the Vibhanga, which is a neutral, subtle kind of consciousness that whenever our sense consciousnesses or mental consciousnesses are not active, it's the one that surfaces to like keep the continuity of consciousness going. Yeah. So in one way, you know, it might sound almost as how the Dzogchen, the Nyingma people talk about Rigpa, you know, a subtle consciousness that, you know, when your gross consciousnesses are not so vibrant, you can see, yeah. Or, yeah, the Galu talk about to have the fundamental innate mind of clear light actually manifest, the other consciousness have to absorb. The Rigpa, it can still manifest in between. You can catch glimpses of it in between thoughts, in between perceptions and things. So it almost sounds something like those ideas, doesn't it? Also the cheetah mantra, the mind basis of all. Okay? So here, when you look at this, you can see, and I think this would be fascinating. You know, I have all these ideas for other people to do their dissertations on. But it would be fascinating to trace that idea from, you know, how did the idea of the Vibhanga come? And how did that idea influence Cheetah Madra? How did it influence you know, Dzogchen? How did it influence Tathagata Garbha? Yeah? And because in the eyes of some of these traditions, this thing that continues is truly existent. Yeah? In the eyes of others, it is not truly existent. Yeah? So, you know, what kind of philosophy is supporting these different kind of views, and how did these views evolve? Yeah. And also, you know, I think you have to count in here the natural human grasping at a self or soul. Yeah. You know, this is coming from ignorance. There is this truly existent thing that is me. So, okay, even if I've got to die and my body goes away and my gross consciousness goes away and I lose my identity in society, my soul is still there. Yeah, I mean, how much the craving for existence is there that we produce these views, you know, that makes some substantial thing that's me. Yeah. And how we automatically go to, if there's not that, then at death time there's nothing. Okay, so here you see we go from absolutism to nihilism in the snap of a fingers. And that's where you see the beauty, you know, of Nagarjuna's view that, you know, that the middle way is not absolutism, it's not nihilism. And it's not the two combined and cut in half as an average of the two either. It's something completely outside those two. Okay. So one of these monks, Archon Mun from the Thai forest tradition, we have his biography in our library, Actually, we have some other books on the Thai forest tradition. They're written by a Thai woman whose name I cannot pronounce. I've met her a couple of times, and they're really fantastic books talking about the lives of these masters who actually lived in the forest before the Thai forests, were cut down, and before the Sangha got this central organized, Sangha council, and so on. They're quite interesting books. So one of these monks, Archon Mun, from the Thai forest tradition, lived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He had visions of Buddha Shakyamuni and the Arhats, leading him to believe that the mental continua of these beings did not cease at the time of death. Such experiences are possible when our defilements have been purified. So in his meditation, Archon Mun had visions of Shakyamuni Buddha and the Arhats. And the first time he had it, the Arhats were sitting in the reverse ordination order. And he said, that's not right. Next time he had the vision, they were sitting in the correct ordination order. Yeah? Interesting. Regarding a Buddha's omniscience or all-knowing, the Sanskrit tradition says that all existence, past, present, and future, appear to a Buddha's mind in every moment. Okay? This is possible because the nature of the mind is clear and aware, and once all obscurations are removed, nothing can prevent the mind from knowing objects. Okay, so His Holiness once explained this as, you have, the nature of the mind is clear and aware. Yeah, so when there's no impediments, it should be able to see whatever is there. So we have some impediments. If we close our eyes, there's an impediment. There's a wall there. We can't see what's on the other side of the wall. Okay, so there's physical impediments. When we talk about the mental consciousness, there's the impediments of karma and afflictions that are so polluted, they're mental dirt, and they just, put this film over the mind so that we can't see things clearly. Yeah. If you take away this film, actually it's more than film, it's like crusted on crud, But if you take that away, then just the clear and aware nature of the mind is present, so objects are naturally going to be perceived by it because they appear to it. From the side of the object, there's no problem with appearing. It's the obscurations, either physical or mental, that come from the side of the subject. Okay? So, that's why the Buddha's mind, because it's completely purified, there's nothing to stop that continuity of clarity and awareness. When the pollution's gone, then it just effortlessly perceives everything that exists. Okay? So that's the Sanskrit view. Some passages in the Pali Canon indicate that while the Buddha knows all existence, he does not simultaneously perceive all of them with one consciousness. Okay? So there's one sutra. When the wanderer Vachagota directly asks the Buddha if it is true that no matter what he is doing, knowledge of everything is always present in him, the Buddha replies that it is not so. He says this in a sutra. I didn't put the sutra reference in here, but I remember reading that sutra. Okay? In general, Pali commentators take the Buddha's response to mean that while he knows all that is, it does not appear to his mind continuously at all times. Rather, while all knowledge is available to him, he must turn his mind to that topic before it effortlessly appears. Present-day followers of the Pali tradition have varying thoughts on this. So, diversity of opinions. Some people doubt that the Buddha can see the future, claiming the future would be predetermined. Okay. Now, it's interesting because before, when we heard the Buddha seeing the future in the context of the 10 powers, what it meant was he understood that if somebody does this action, that result will come. If they do that action, another result will come. You know, here, yeah, it's meaning something a little bit different. Yeah. However, okay, so people claim that, doubt that the Buddha can see the future, claiming the future would be predetermined. However, one does not entail the other. In other words, someone seeing the future does not mean the future is predetermined. At any particular moment, the Buddha could see the constellation of causes and conditions that could possibly bring about a certain event in the future. At the same time, a Buddha knows that these causes and conditions change in the very next moment. Okay. So Buddha might be able to see, oh, these causes and conditions, can produce that. But the moment you throw something else in the next moment, then something else is going to come out as the result. Okay. Now what's interesting is the commentary to the Visuddhimagga says that the Buddha knows past and future events by direct perception. What does that mean? And the Bhattisambhidhamagga confirms that all past, present, and future phenomena come within the Buddha's faculty of knowledge. So what does it mean to perceive the future events with direct perception? It almost sounds like to us that those things would have to be going on now for them to be perceived with direct perception. Clearly, the future is not happening now. Yeah, because the definition of future is that which has not yet occurred. So if it has occurred and hasn't yet ceased, then it's the present, in which case you could perceive it with direct perception. So I would like to go and ask somebody who, what that actually means. Yeah. Because if you look at it from the Sanskrit view, remember we did all this study about jigpa, and future objects are affirming negatives. They affirm that the causes, most of the causes and conditions are present, but they negate that the result has come about yet. Okay, so what does it mean to perceive the future? Think about it from the Sanskrit tradition. When we studied about the 3 times, they talk about the object's future being an affirming negative. Okay, in other words, something's being affirmed and something's being negated at the same time. What's being affirmed is that most, but not all, of the causes and conditions for something have come together. What's being negated in terms of the future is that the object has not yet arisen. The result hasn't yet come. Okay? So that is called an affirming negative. And it is, when you categorize phenomena, it's one of the abstract composites, the Demenducci, or what's the other translation? The 3 kinds of impermanent form. The way Jeffrey translates it, it's a long phrase. Non-associated compositional factor. Yeah. so they would, this future object would be, I translate it as abstract composite, much simpler. Jeffrey calls it non-associated compositional factor, which is hard to remember, okay, as you can see. So it seems to me that perceiving the future would mean somebody perceives that affirming negative, which of course is, it will be different in the next moment as the causes and conditions change. Okay. So seeing the future doesn't mean that you close your eyes and tomorrow is already, streaming in front of your eyes. How can you see the future like that? Because that would mean the future's already happening now, and then it wouldn't be the future. Okay? To see it with direct perception.
Is it really wrong because to say that the jikpa is at work because those causes really are the jikpa of something that's...
The jikpa is the having happened. It's the past of the object.
Something.
Yes.
But
But we're not talking about the past now, we're talking about the future.
right, but the causes and conditions that are creating the future are the jikpa of something or some things. Is that not right? That the disintegrated of having happened is part of the causal condition that's bringing things about.
Yeah, they usually don't talk about it that way, that the jikpa of the seed is they would say that the jigpa of the seed exists at the same time as the sprout. Okay, because the past of the seed exists at the same time as the sprout. Yeah. But the seed is the cause of the sprout. The jigpa of the seed is not the cause of the sprout, because it exists at the time of the sprout, and cause and effect are not simultaneous. So some people may be getting a little confused. You're hearing terminology that you haven't heard yet and don't understand the concepts. That's okay. Sometime you'll hear it, sometime you'll learn about it. What I think is good, and why I'm bringing this up for the people who have heard that, is then they begin to see how what you study in one text can apply to a discussion, an actual discussion, that what we're learning in the philosophical texts aren't just abstract blah blah, but you apply it and then you really think about it and think about what can this mean. Yeah. So that's why I would like to find out, that the commentator to the Visuddhimagga is probably long gone, but somebody who understands him to understand what does he mean by saying that past and future events can be seen by direct perception. What's his definition of direct perception, and so on. Okay, the difference in how the Pali and Sanskrit traditions describe the Buddha need not confuse us. Okay, so, because otherwise but the Pali said he doesn't exist anymore, because if you say the aggregates no longer exist, there's no basis of designation for the term Buddha, so who in the world is your refuge object? Who do you take refuge in if you say that the Buddha's aggregates have ceased? And the Buddha, there's no continuum of whoever was Shakyamuni Buddha. It becomes problematic. It can become confusing. And then people can say, well, how come the Pali tradition says this? And how come the Sanskrit tradition says this? And, what's the right answer? I want the one right answer. Just tell me the right answer, please. I don't want to have to think about these things. Yeah. But you see, this is the whole point. We're supposed to think about it. Yeah. And analyze it and look at it from this angle and that angle and the other thing. Okay. So, how can you see that all these different things that's said about the Buddha and his omniscience and his parinirvana need not be confusing? Okay. So we don't have to choose one view over the other. Rather, we can see which view inspires us at a particular time. When we feel discouraged, thinking of Siddhartha Gautama as having been an ordinary being who faced the same difficulties on the path as we do is helpful. Just as he diligently practiced the path and attained awakening, so can we. So thinking of the Buddha's life can be very inspiring to us. You know, he encountered difficulties, he underwent hardship, he overcame it all. We can deal with our problems and our hardship too. They don't have to overcome us. Okay, so seeing him as an ordinary being who attained enlightenment in that lifetime, very, very helpful. Okay, at other times, seeing Buddha Shakyamuni as one who attained awakening eons ago and appeared in our world as an emanation body is more helpful. This view gives us the feeling of being cared for by many Buddhas who are present to guide us. So if you think of the four kayas of a Buddha, then you realize, wow, there's all these Buddhas existing right now in the universe. I'm not some sentient being stuck in my own samsara, you know, in my own suffering with no help. There's all these Buddhas in their emanation bodies, and even Buddhas that aren't in emanation bodies, Buddhas who still in their minds have, you know, amazing compassion for me and what I'm going through and what's going on in this world right now. And so when we think of that, then we don't get discouraged, you know. It really, it gives us a feeling of being cared for and a feeling that there's a lot of support in this universe. There's all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas rooting for me. Yeah, they're probably all around in my life, but I'm criticizing them all the time because I see them as ordinary beings, you know. Okay, so when I contemplate the Buddha's qualities as depicted in the early Pali Suttas, it seems his abilities as portrayed in the Sanskrit sutras are a natural extension of those. For example, the Buddha tells Ananda in the long discourses that he remembers attending many hundreds of assemblies of Khatiyas, the ruling class, where he sat and spoke with them. To do this, he adopted their appearance and speech and instructed, inspired, and delighted them with Dhamma discourses. Now I'm wondering, I didn't put it here, but in what lifetime is the Buddha talking about having done that? Because he certainly didn't take off his robes and put on, you know, the ruling class's dress. So he must be speaking about his previous lives, okay? And so he adopted their appearance and speech and instructed, inspired, and delighted them with Dhamma discourses. Yet these people did not know who he was and wondered whether he was a deva, a celestial being, or a human being. Having instructed them, he disappeared. He must be talking about previous lives. The Buddha says the same about his actions in assemblies of Brahmins, householders, ascetics, and devas. So this passage reminds me of the activities of a Buddha's emanation body. Doesn't it sound like the activities of a Buddha's emanation body to you? Appearing in a form that appears normal and easily can communicate with whatever group of people there are to communicate with, acts like them, talks like them, instructs, inspires, delights them with the teachings, and then when they're no longer needed, they disappear. Okay?
Remember, why would that have to be a past life then? Because emanation bodies can emanate multiple.
Right. But I think if you're looking at it from the view, this is a Pali Sutta, So they would talk about the Buddha having multiple emanations in that lifetime. Okay. So nowhere in either the Pali or Sanskrit sutras is the Buddha seen as either omnipotent or as a creator. He does not seek our worship, and we do not have to propitiate him to gain boons. He does not reward those who follow his teachings and punish those who don't. The Buddha described the path to awakening from his own experience. His intention is only to benefit sentient beings according to their individual inclinations and temperaments. Okay, so we've talked about that yesterday, and then I'll just read the next paragraph and then we'll stop. However, we think of the Buddha as already awakened or as attaining awakening during his life on earth. His life is an example and his attainments an inspiration for us. He had the internal strength to follow his spiritual yearnings, and his confidence in the potential of the human mind was unassailable. With great perseverance, he trained in serenity and insight. Yeah. So his confidence in his internal strength to fulfill the path, and his confidence in the potential of the human mind. Yeah. So that's telling us that we have to have more confidence in ourselves and more confidence in the potential of our minds, and not just say, oh, I'm a limited sentient being. I have so many problems. This hurts and that hurts. And I have this problem with my family and that problem with somebody else and with my job and with my colleagues and my parents. And my head hurts and, I'm full of problems. And, I can't do anything to deal with it. It's all too much. Yeah. If we have that kind of view, are we in line with the Buddha's way of thinking? Yeah, it's super wrong view, isn't it? Our minds are completely 100 million miles away from how the Buddha's thinking. Then we say to ourselves, see, I told you, I'm so far away from how the Buddha thinks, I'm really hopeless.
That's where we go.
Yeah, that's where we go, isn't it? Any way we can put ourselves down, we do it. So it's really important, to think about how the Buddha sees sentient beings. Yeah, and the Buddha is, omniscient. He knows things correctly. He doesn't have wrong views and mistaken perceptions. So if the Buddha sees sentient beings like us, as full of this incredible potential, let's give ourselves a break and see ourselves as full of potential. Yeah. So I think this needs to be our homework. Yeah, because the more you have confidence, self-confidence based on your potential, the easier your whole Dharma practice is going to go. Because you're not going to be constantly shooting yourself in the foot. You're going to be able to go ahead and say, yeah, I have the same Buddha nature as the Buddha had before he was awakened. He did it. I can do it. He has confidence in me. I need to have some confidence in myself. And identify my wrong views as wrong views and throw them out instead of clinging on to them. Okay?
Yes, we will do this directly.
Yes, I will do this. Yes, that's it. Yes! I will do as directed. Yes! Okay, everybody, come on.
Yes, I will do as directed.
Come on, I didn't see everybody. You guys were, yes. Come on. Okay. Yes! Venerable Sultra.